exciting conclusion of how this case is going to turn out. So Kamala Harris is going to show some testicular fortitude. You're going to have Isaac Espinosa, a 29-year-old popular police officer who's going to get murdered and killed by essentially a gang member, a drug-dealing gang member who's like part of this, rival gang, and there's not much redeeming value to David Hill. David Hill is going to, in 2004, when Kamala is the prosecutor, when she's the DA, District Attorney of San Francisco, Isaac Espinosa is going to get shot and killed by David Hill, and then his partner, Barry Parker, is going to get shot in the foot or in the leg. And I'm not sure when he gets shot. But this is concluding. It cut off, so I have to do it in two parts, but that's okay. So, just, I guess, quickly, all you had was the two police officers, Isaac and Barry, pull up to David Hill and another guy. David's acting weird. They try to question him. He's walking off. They get out, and then he turns around and he just shoots him. And then he runs away. And he does not cover his tracks very well whatsoever, okay? So Isaac Espinosa is going to die 10:12 p.m., which is only 38 minutes after he had been shot, which is kind of crazy to me. So he gets shot in the stomach, he gets shot in the thigh, and he died from the loss of blood from gunshot wounds from his thigh and abdomen. So apparently he only got shot twice, but I would assume, why couldn't you have put pressure on it? Why did he bleed so much? He had lost too much blood and they couldn't do anything to save him. And so it seems like it was very much a preventable, shooting. It's an unfortunate thing. It's definitely David Hill who did it, but how come he's laying there on the street? Where's EMS? How long did it take to get there? How come Barry Parker isn't putting pressure on these wounds and making sure he's not losing all this blood and then getting him to the hospital as soon as possible? David Lee Hill, the police are going to find his pea coat. He had a black pea coat. He had gloves. And inside of that black pea coat, he had a baggie of marijuana, and he had his ID in it, which is either really stupid or just too much fucking evidence. There's too much evidence. What? His ID was in the pea coat, so he throws his pea coat off, and his gloves, and his AK-47, and the ID and marijuana. He left his marijuana in his coat. I know you're in a hurry, but I feel like you'd grab your marijuana and your ID. But that's, whatever. Assume that's true, then that means they got him, point blank. It's clearly him. He tossed it over a picket fence of a home on Newhall Street. Then afterwards, he goes to his mom's house, and he sleeps there for the night, wakes up the next day, and he goes to the hospital. And he's talking crazy, I think he's feigning mental illness in order to, get off of this by reason of insanity. They're going to catch him, so eventually you're going to have to face this. So he goes to a hospital, and he was talking about being a slave who was being beaten up by white masters, and then he's going to get arrested that day. The cops, when they come to the hospital, they see David Hill holding two plastic flowers, and they order him to get down on the ground, and they handcuff him. While he's being handcuffed, he just keeps on saying, "Mary Lou made me do it. Oh, Mary Lou made me do it. Master Charlie, don't beat me. I pick over 100 pounds of cotton a day. Please, Master Charlie, don't beat me. Guards, I'm Julius Caesar, and I need to go back to Rome. Guards, I'm Julius Caesar. I need to go back to Rome." So he's just kind of saying crazy shit. David Hill hit his head on the glass to the door window twice. So he's hitting his head on the door window. Then he pisses on himself. He's going to pee, and then he's going to roll back into his piss. And he kept saying, "Master, Master, don't hurt me, Master," when they were trying to handcuff him, and then they are going to do a gun residue test on him. The jury had some issues with Barry Parker's testimony. So Barry Parker is contradicting himself. He's just lying, left and right. So that means Isaac Espinosa, he didn't have as good of a case as. So anyways, this David Hill's got a pretty good lawyer. and they're picking apart Barry Parker's testimony. A jury said that to them, anyone who shines a flashlight on somebody is a police officer, obviously. So they had issues with Barry Parker's testimony because when did he identify himself? He changed it, different times. They said he identified himself, and then the other one they kept identifying them. They over-identified themselves. They said it too many times, but then he also said he wasn't for sure. So which is it? He's not for sure. He identified himself this time. That time he did it. They did it. And so Barry Parker's testimony is suspect, but the jury kind of sorted through the bullshit, and they said, well, who's going to go around shining a flashlight on people? So if you did want to impersonate a police officer, then they have to comply. American law says if, somebody, shines a flashlight on you and they say that they're the police, well, you don't really have a choice whatsoever. So Barry Parker said that he was only 70% sure that David Lee Hill is the guy who did it, but David Lee Hill's DNA was on the AK-47. So he's only 70% sure that his memory of that guy is the same guy, but his DNA was on the AK-47. But that could be the preponderance. It's just too much evidence. This is set up. Barry Parker was interviewed 48 hours afterwards, and then some psychologists said that since he had been interviewed so long, then, he was confused. He didn't know what was going on. After 48 hours, he said that the badge was underneath her shirt. It was underneath his shirt, but then he couldn't remember. And then somehow he's wearing it, and it's clear as day that he's wearing it. So, in spite of Barry Parker being a liar, so who knows what actually was happening that day. What we have is just, I wish David Hill would have testified. I feel like he didn't really say much, and the prosecution had to prove their case. So, second-degree murder gets 15 years to life in prison, but premeditated first-degree murder gets 25 years to life in prison. So he's only going to get the second-degree murder. But the victim, they're going to say that the victim knew that the on-duty officer was really a cop, and the jury found that he knew that it was probably a police officer. Therefore, David Lee Hill faced a mandatory life without parole sentence under the 1997 law. So he's going to be declared guilty of second-degree murder with a police officer, special circumstance, and firearm enhancements. That's what he's going to get, declared guilty of. Kamala Harris successfully appealed a federal judge 2014 ruling that said that the death penalty was unconstitutional in California. So if she's opposed to the death penalty, why didn't she just let the ruling stand? But instead, she successfully appealed it. And the reason they said it was unconstitutional is because of its lengthy appeals process. So I guess she appealed it quickly. See, it's not lengthy. I did it quickly. Overall, however, so besides that example and then, withholding evidence for the people that was on death row, for innocent people, that is unacceptable, and they're on death row and they're innocent. So, there's some question about whether or not a person's guilty. I think everybody unanimously agrees that innocent people shouldn't even be punished, let alone be put to death. But guilty people, should murderers, I guess I just believe in the most extreme circumstances. So you have somebody who kills, children, they probably should be put to death. You do it quickly, judiciously, expeditiously, expedite it, and have rapid due process. I think all those things are correct. But I admire people who are to the right of me. So Kamala is more progressive than me on guns and the death penalty. But on economics, on freedom, on free college, free health care, on legalizing weed, she believes in those things, but it's like to the core of me, whereas she's got some explaining to do. So I left libertarian the shit out of her on a whole host of issues. But when it comes to the death penalty, she's very anti-death penalty, and so I think that's, admirable. It's a cop killer. So just imagine the pressure she had, all across the nation. That this person, eye for an eye, justice would say that he deserves to die. And I guess maybe they didn't have a 100% case, and the laws in California are different, so they had to, sort of thread a needle just to be able to get him on something about how he knew it was a police officer, but he didn't know that it was a police officer. It depends on what the definition of is. And so they're able to actually extend, make his punishment more difficult with some sort of legal shenanigans. and then she's going to convict him and get life in parole. So some police officer had said, considering we're in San Francisco, that's the best we're going to get, so I'm happy. And, you know, pushing for the death penalty, I mean, there's a philosophy to this whole thing. And the philosophy is, if the state is killing people, I don't know, I think it's a good release valve, because if you're going to, you got police shootings. Police kill 1,000 people every year. And so there are executions, and those are very quick and cheap executions. So if the state isn't, you know, killing its most heinous, most wicked, disturbing citizens, then the people are going to find a way to, you know, sort of get that, you know, bloodlust some other way. So they'll live vicariously through the police. So I feel like there would be less police violence if the state were, I mean, right now we're taking care of James Holmes. James Holmes, we got homeless people that don't even have a fucking home, but we're going to give him food, clothing, water, a space to sleep in, a toilet. I bet you a lot of homeless would accept the conditions of James Holmes. And how did he get that? You know, it's imprisonment, so he gets no freedom, but he gets his life. And he also gets special protection, so we spend all this fucking money on this killer, and a firing squad. How long? I mean, how quick would that take? Just put him in front of a firing squad, and that's all she wrote. You don't have to pay for him. You don't have to worry about protecting him. He killed a bunch of people, including a bunch of innocent children. Yeah, he's very deserving. He's very worthy of capital punishment. And especially in our society where people, you know, there's people out here that are being left behind, and meanwhile we're going to spend, what, $1,000 a day for James Holmes? That's a lot for the taxpayer. That's a big-ass burden for the taxpayer to pay for some, you know, murderous, savage piece of shit that not only should he not get the same, you know, homeless people get less respect. So, it's, yeah. Only for extreme cases, I admire. So, this was for Kamala Harris, she showed that she stuck to her principles. She's against the death penalty. And then that's a strong contrast against Joe Biden and Donald Trump, because Joe Biden, he had actually extended the death penalty for 61 offenses with the 1994 crime bill. So Joe Biden in 1994 added 61 offenses for, you know, reasons to put a person to death. Now Joe Biden is sitting there saying that he's opposed to the death penalty. So Joe Biden, you got some explaining to do. So they both, you know, she's better than Biden. Joe Biden's a piece of shit. Kamala Harris has some worthy credentials. And so does Pete Buttigieg, so does Tulsi, so does Elizabeth Warren. I like Jay Inslee somewhat, Cory Booker. So John Delaney, fuck him. John Hickenlooper, he's a smart guy, but he's just too myopic. We live in a half-capitalist, half-socialistic system right now, and so nobody seems to be admitting to that truth. And what else? So Joe Biden is actually, he was for the death penalty and now he's against it, so he's just flip-flopping, right? But Kamala Harris, she's never flip-flop on the death penalty. There was only that, you know, her office had appealed a federal judge's 2014 ruling that said that the death penalty was unconstitutional because of its lengthy appeals process, but that's the only sort of, I guess, asterisk, that's the only sort of gray mark on her record. And we can look into that. I bet you she'll say that she didn't know about it, and when she found out, she told him not to do it. Or maybe she has some other, maybe she's the Attorney General, so she felt obligated to, you know, make the argument. I'm not for sure what the, you know, question is there. But compared to Donald Trump, you know, Donald Trump, if someone declared the death penalty unconstitutional and he had appealed a federal judge's 2014 ruling, that, okay, so it's, you know, there's just no comparison. So I feel like she might have wavered a little bit in terms of the theoretical argument of the thing, but it's not a body blow when it comes to the death penalty. Kamala Harris is very, 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 very against, you know, so much against the death penalty. So I trust Kamala Harris when it comes to, you know, her sticking to her, you know, beliefs. She's got principles, and one of those principles is the state should not put anybody to death. So, you know, I respect that. I don't totally agree with that, but I don't agree with Donald Trump, who said the Central Park Five, they should be put to death. So, you know, if you have one person that is against the death penalty to a fault, and you got another person who's in favor of the death penalty to a fault, That person needs to die. That person needs to die. He's best friends with Kim Jong-un in Saudi Arabia, who's beheading women because they, showed their earlobe and a little bit of ankle, and atheists and Christians and Buddhists and anybody who's not Muslim. So Saudi Arabia is just this horrible dictatorship, and they're beheading people right in the public square. So he's, up in his authoritarian bullshit, isn't he? And so if I have a choice between one person who's in favor of the death penalty all the time, no matter what, if they're innocent or guilty, and then another person who's opposed to the death penalty no matter what, if they're innocent or guilty, I'm going to go with Kamala Harris over Donald Trump. I'll talk more about the Central Park 5 coming up, but yeah, Kamala Harris ain't that bad, Bernie brothers. Come on, Bernie bros. Come on, Berners. If you think she's threatening Bernie Sanders, then you're showing your insecurity. You really think she's got a chance? The media is pushing her. And, she's got this, bad money, but that doesn't necessarily, just because Hillary Clinton people are supporting her, that doesn't mean she is Hillary. Maybe Hillary found, a protege that's even better than herself. She found a protege that's pure of heart and wanted to stand up for, so, Kamala Harris, she's got her good points and she's got her bad points, and it's crazy that I feel like I'm being controversial. Kamala's kind of good and kind of bad. No, she's not. She is the devil. She